Hi, welcome back. Today is a Throwback Thursday video. For this one, it's a book that I should have read as a kid and never got around to, and I have a copy of it on my bookshelf because I really liked how the copy looked, and I was like, oh, I'll get to it one day, I'll get to it one day. You know how that goes, 5 years later, and you still haven't read it. But I want to apologize, I sound stuffy and my allergies are all messed up because it doesn't look like it outside because this is Texas, and it won't look like it for several months, but autumn is coming, fall is coming, and Halloween's coming soon, and I'm so excited. I've already started Halloween costumes. This is totally off topic. Okay, anyways, the book that we're doing today for Throwback Thursday is Harriet the Spy by Louise Fitzhugh. Harriet the Spy came out in 1964, so it's been a staple of children's literature since then. It is a beloved book. One quote that I was reading about it was that it makes lifelong devotees to it, and I can really see, you know, where that comes from now that I've finally read it. I listened to the audiobook because I'm me and I listen to most of my books, and so I didn't get to look at the illustrations until just now, but Louise Fitzhugh apparently drew all the illustrations herself. Harriet the Spy, if you have never read it or seen the movie adaptation in the mid-90s, 1994 with Michelle Trachtenberg, is about a young girl in New York City in the Upper West Side who is an aspiring writer, and to train herself to be a good writer, she spies on the people in her neighborhood, including her parents and her neighbors, her best friends, her schoolmates, things like that. And she keeps everything written down in notebooks. She has a lot of notebooks. She has a nanny slash governess called Old Golly, and she is full of wonderful pearls of wisdom and really teaches Harriet, you know, the ways of the world in kind but also in a not coddling way. Harriet really likes things the way that she likes things. She loves her tomato sandwiches, and she loves to do things in a certain way, and she has a schedule that she follows, and she does not like to deviate from that schedule. During a game of tag at the park, Harriet leaves her notebook on a bench, and when she gets back to it, her schoolmates have found it, and they have read all the horrible things that she's written about them. That does not go well. That doesn't go over well with her friends and her schoolmates, and she is ostracized from all of them. Nobody will talk to her. They straight up start a club without her, against her, and things deteriorate from there. To top it off, Old Golly leaves. She goes and she gets married, and she leaves Harriet because Harriet's old enough that she can be on her own now, and Harriet does not deal well with any of this, and there is fallout, and you know, people have to cope with things, and Harriet has to make amends for the wrongs that she's done. It's really good. I definitely bawled my eyes out at least one or two parts, which is not a rare thing for me to do, as I'm sure I've mentioned on this channel before. But I just thought it was a really, like, a great story about growing up and not having things go your way all the time. Really liked that. This book came out in 1964, and reading it in 2016 as somebody who grew up in the 80s and 90s, there were a lot of things that didn't jump out to me in quite as drastic a way as would have jumped out to kids reading this in the, you know, early 60s, you know, going forward. So I was reading that a lot of lesbians really identify with Harriet because she wears boys' clothes, and she wears, you know, Chuck Taylor Converses and things like that. And Louise Fitzhugh was a lesbian as well. So she was, you know, very iconic, and they really identified with her. And as a girl who never really was into dresses or anything until she got to be older, I was like, well, yeah, kids want to wear pants and tennis shoes. So that didn't spring out to me, but looking back on it, I can really see how that would be very important to see yourself in literature like that. Her best friend Scout and Janie are also are Sport. Sport and Janie are also very different than stereotypical kids in, you know, literature of the time. Janie is an aspiring scientist, and she one day wants to blow up the world, which is lovely and terrifying at the same time. And she has a laboratory in her room, and she's always running experiments and burning stuff and like exploding things in her room and terrifying her parents, who are conspiring with Harriet's parents to send them to dance classes, and they're both really against that. Meanwhile, Sport is in a single parent household. His dad is an aspiring writer as well as Harriet, and he's trying to get his book published. And so Sport is who wants to be an accountant when he grows up, or a ball player, either way, is Sport's in charge of cooking and cleaning and keeping things together for his dad, which is very against type for, you know, stereotypical boys of that time period, which on some level I recognized and appreciated, but on another level I almost took it for granted. So it was really interesting to look back and think, oh yeah, that's not how kids were portrayed at this time, or any, you know, people for the most part. So that's Harriet the Spy. I've already talked for 7.5 minutes about it. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad that I finally got around to reading it, and I'm sad that it was such a big gap in my, you know, my education of children's literature for such a long time. So, have you read Harriet the Spy before? Have you watched the movie? The whole time I was reading it, I was trying to imagine Michelle Trachtenberg as Harriet, and it did not fit up with the way that I was reading Harriet, but I kept also imagining Rosie O'Donnell as Old Golly, because I know that she played Old Golly in the movie, and I really like that a lesbian played a character in this book that was written by a lesbian that a lot of lesbians throughout, you know, time have identified with. I thought it was really cool. So if you've watched the movie and liked it, or, you know, saw it after you read the book and you didn't like it, tell me below in the comments. If you have another idea for what I should do for a Throwback Thursday, I'm up for books that I have read and would like to reread, or books that I shouldn't have read, or should have read and haven't read. So yeah, put those down below as well. And make sure you do all those other nice things that you can do on YouTube, like this video, share it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll be back next week with, I think, a Fun Friday video. Okay, bye. So another really cool thing that I found out about Harriet the Spy was that it has been cited by an ex-CIA operative, Lindsay Moran, that it was the inspiration for her to become a spy in real life. And I think that's so cool that this book of this little girl who sneaks around and hides in dumbwaiters and spies on people, you know, inspired others to become real life spies. The way that Dana Scully in the X-Files inspired an entire generation of young women to go and become doctors and scientists. And I love that. I love seeing that effect that literature and pop culture can have on the next generation of young people. I think that's